Good morning. Welcome back into Wake Up America on this Monday morning. I want to welcome back in our powerhouse panel today. We've got Mark Halperin, former Congresswoman Nan Hayworth is with us, and Christopher Arps is back here. We are continuing to cover this breaking news this morning. Former Secretary of State, 84-year-old Colin Powell, dying from COVID complications. His family put a statement out on Facebook early this morning. I want to read that to you now. Quote, General Colin L. Powell, former U.S. Secretary of State and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, passed away this morning due to complications from COVID-19. He was fully vaccinated. We want to thank the medical staff at Walter Reed National Medical Center for their caring treatment. We've lost a remarkable and loving father, grandfather, and a great American. Again, that statement being posted to Facebook by the Powell family. Christopher Arps, he was a hero to many in the African American community, especially, and somebody that shaped U.S. foreign policy for a generation. What are your initial reactions to this news this morning?
I was just shocked. I thought that last time I saw him on television, he seemed to be healthy. He seemed to be doing well. There weren't any reports of him being hospitalized. So this is a complete shock for me. As I said earlier, I greatly admired Colin Powell for what he achieved. It was magnificent for me to see an African American helping to lead the first Gulf War effort. I read his book, which inspired me even more. This is a shock. But to get political for a minute, Rob, I'm just wondering how will his death affect the call for mask and vaccine mandates since he was fully vaccinated?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, Chris. And everything that we discuss, everything that happens in our society, in our country, in our culture right now you can draw a straight line back to COVID-19. And I'm sure there will be an angle. I don't know if now is the appropriate time, but I do think you make a good point. Colin Powell was the first African American chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, was the first African American Secretary of State. Mark, I said this a moment ago, but I know you began your political career during the Bush administration. Colin Powell played a key role in the Gulf War, the first Gulf War. Take us back to the early 1990s.
He was a member of the foreign policy establishment. And as you know, it's a little bit unusual for folks in the career path in the military to move over to the political side. It's not unprecedented, but he was the first Black American to do that, to go from career in military service, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, to then move over to a more political job as Secretary of State. And so for the Washington establishment, this is a big blow. For the military establishment, again, he's a singular towering figure. And then for kids around the country, some older now, but kids who over the years inspired by him, the work he did in community service, the work he did in civic society and education. Right. There'll be a lot written and said about that in the coming days. And I'm not saying it overshadows his career in foreign policy and national security, but it is a testament to what a great guy he was, what a great visionary he was, that he left the military, left government service, and went on to that second career where he impacted the lives of so many young people.
Yeah, four-star general. He oversaw operations for Desert Storm and Desert Shield, of course. Nan, he was a national security advisor to former President Ronald Reagan, but later in life he had a falling out with the Republican Party, which changes sort of how people looked at him, especially recently. How do you see that?
Well, I was disappointed, Rob, when General Powell expressed support for then candidate Obama. He may have been in the second term, but I felt that, and I respected General Powell tremendously, and Secretary Powell, as a figure of immense dignity. And someone who certainly led a life that was exemplary for any American. And that was a great part of the message of his life and career. Policy is so important. And I regretted that, unfortunately, on policy, which I'm sure was very important to General Powell, there was something of a parting of the ways, but nonetheless, enormous respect for his life. And I am proud as an American to honor him today. Yeah. His prosecution of the Gulf War in particular was immensely successful and should be remembered as as a great triumph.
Again, he was the first African-American Secretary of State. He was in office from 2001 to 2005. Chris, an incredibly consequential time to serve as Secretary of State. And many say he reshaped the office just by who he was and the time in which he served. Of course, he was there during the September 11th attacks on our country. A very consequential time to be a Secretary of State.
Yeah, I think it's just an interesting perspective to have someone who was a four-star general, who was engaged in military operations and things of that nature, to being a diplomat and trying to avoid wars. The reports that came out said that he was a little disgruntled after he went to the UN, saying that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iran and Iraq, and he felt that he was lied to and was sent up there to tell a lie. And I think that's what started kind of his drift away from the Republican Party. If you remember, after President Bush won re-election, he said that he would stay around to the beginning of the next administration till his successor was named, and he was told, no, you can go ahead and offer your resignation now. Well, so there was a lot of bad blood there, but he has a great career.
Mark, take us back to what Chris just brought up there. It reminds me of, I remember Adlai Stevenson doing this in the 1960s, a famous story. He went there and he made his case before the UN. He was incredibly convincing. It turned out that Adlai Stevenson was right during the Cuban Missile Crisis, but in this case, Secretary of State General Colin Powell was wrong when he tried to convince the international community that WMDs, boy, I'll never forget that term, that they existed in Iraq, where in fact they certainly did not.
Yeah, Colin Powell and the head of the CIA at that time, George Tenet, both put their credibility on the line and testified for the world that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. It was certainly not the high point of Secretary Powell's career. There's lots of, histories have been written about who was to blame for that. But certainly that did put a little bit of distance between him and the Republican Party. But also he was attracted to the candidacy, as was discussed before, of Barack Obama, that historic candidacy. And on a lot of social issues, gay rights, for instance, General Powell differed from the Republican platform. And that caused him to go towards endorsing a lot of Democrats for office in a way that his former colleagues in the Republican Party did not like. He wasn't, as I said before, he wasn't very political, although he did think about running for president. He was much more interested in governance than he was in politics. And while he drifted to become more associated with the Democrats over the years, his basic view of America, his basic view of issues didn't really change much. And that incident with the WMDs is certainly, as I said, not the high point of his career, but it's something for which he got a lot of attention. It was kind of a pivot point in his relationship between the two parties. Yeah,
that's a good point. That was February 5th, 2003, when Powell addressed the United Nations Security Council to make the case against Iraq under UN Resolution 1441 about those weapons of mass destruction. But he was one of these political figures, Dan, and it happens every now and again. It happened with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She was spoofed on Saturday Night Live. She became an icon of the left. Powell, Chris Rock had a great bit about Colin Powell in his stand-up comedy back in the 90s. He was one of those people that transcended his role in government. How do you think he'll be remembered ultimately?
I think he'll be remembered as a groundbreaking public figure, public servant, certainly a military leader. The hiccups that we were just discussing can be found in many a career. I think General Powell always did explain himself. He was not hesitant to express his views on matters that he felt were of crucial importance. I think he did, yes, want to support the advance of the Black community in America in every way he could. I think that's probably one of the major reasons he supported Barack Obama. But he really is someone who should have our respect. And his career will indeed be studied for generations to come.
Yeah, Nan, by the way, he formally left the Republican Party not long ago. It was January 10th after the riots at the U.S. Capitol. That's when he said that he, quote, "I no longer consider myself a Republican. Mark, George W. Bush has not put out a statement just yet. We've been keeping an eye out for that. I'm sure that will come later on today. Just in about 15, 20 seconds, he resigned in 2005, Colin Powell, and that set the stage for Condoleezza Rice to take over as Secretary of State. Was there bad blood between those two?
It was certainly a rough period, and Powell had a kind of a fractious relationship with Dick Cheney, for instance.
Yeah.
That some behind the scenes, some in public view. I would be surprised if Presidents Bush, Clinton, and Obama didn't all speak at his memorial service. I suspect they'll all be there because although there were some rough moments with them all at one time or another, he was, again, just a towering figure in American national security and foreign policy. All of them relied on him. And one of the rules associated with General Powell, Secretary Powell, was people had said, if you bring him into government, if you hire him for a job, you better beware because you can't really fire him. He's too big to be fired. And that's not said about very many people in American life, that they are in some ways bigger than any president who would hire them. The other rule for which he was known, connected again to the Bush administration, was the Pottery Barn rule. He said, if you go into a country and you invade a country, you're responsible. You break it, you own it.
Yeah.
And that has guided a lot of our foreign policy. He was no fan of Donald Trump, but Donald Trump very much believed in and understood that rule and saw the lesson there. And you saw in the time Donald Trump was in office, he adhered to the Pottery Barn rule. He didn't break anything because he didn't want America to have to own it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's going to be interesting. This could be, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but this could be the first time we see the former presidents together since Donald Trump left office. I think that this funeral rises to that level. Who knows if it's in Washington and if he lies in state in the Capitol Rotunda. I think, but that could happen. Of course, we'll get more information about the funeral over the next couple of days. Panel, really enjoyed having you on this morning. Thank you, Mark Halperin, Dan Hayworth, Christopher Arps. Thank you. Good to see you guys.
Thanks, Rob.